With that, the first speaker is Dr. Allan Lindsley. We got referred to him. He's his biography, he's a dairy farmer kid, grew up on the farm doing dairy work. He still owns the farm, but he's raising blueberries. And he is learned from the top doctors around the world in chiropractic. He moved into chiropractor after he had gotten his mechanical engineering degree. And he was working a bunch with a company called Cellcore. And the one thing I've always tried to do, I've lost a couple of family members to cancer, was find a way to lessen that problem. We talked a little about number one herbicide sold that has a lot of health risk associated with it. So what we were hoping for was find a person that would develop a microbial mix that would break Roundup down in the soil quickly, affordably. And the lady that was asking questions up here, Martha Carlin, she's going to talk today. And we also wanted something, a product that would pull Roundup out of a person's body and eliminate or lessen their health risk. The company we worked with, Cellcore, developed a program specifically for Carol and I called the Farmer Shield. That company got bought out, but Allan is replicating all of those, and I think he's got some product with him today. But he'll speak first, very knowledgeable, and then also he's looking at things a little bit different in that a couple people wondered, why do we have medical people in an agricultural conference? Why not? People are as healthy as the food there is nutritious. So with that, Allan, he's from Bloomer, Wisconsin, which is just a little bit north of where they make Line and Kugel's beer. Beautiful area. He's a hell of a construction guy. Wells has Kubota tractors, and we were up at his place a couple times. Beautiful area. So Allan, you're next.
Can you guys hear me? Turn it up. Yes. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. All right. Thanks, Bob. So we advance the slides here. Well, Bob, thanks for inviting me. It's always interesting. He told me not to let it be too foo-foo today. I'm not sure what foo-foo means to Bob. He's as foo-foo as they come. Everybody knows that, right? So just a little background on myself before we get started. I was raised on a dairy farm, small dairy farm, 50 cows. Every quarter, half mile, there's a dairy farm. And as you all know, in our area up there, they're all gone. There's no small farms left. And that's a really sad thing, because that was a real way of living. I loved it. My dad was actually killed in a farm accident 23 years ago, like the skid steer. I didn't know what was wrong with him. I saw him lose his energy, his drive, his thought process. Is this thing still working? Can you hear me okay? Can they turn it up? So I watched my dad slowly disappear over about a 5-year period. My mom thought he was crazy. I knew he was sick. We didn't know what was wrong with him. So slowly, he lost his health. One morning, he used a Tallman jack to put the skid steer up, and my mom found him crushed. Okay? And I was called, and I knew immediately in my mind that he had passed. And that was the day I committed to myself that I was going to try to make a difference in the healthcare field, because he was on 9 medications. They told me he was depressed. They told me he was fatigued. They told me he was too old. They told me it was a heart attack. All this stuff was, and it was a small dairy farm. It was stressful. But I watched him just slowly decline. And in the end, I figured out it was probably Lyme disease and some of the chemicals he was using at the farm that got him, because of how his brain was going away. But the real question I'm bringing down to... Can we turn this mic off? Does anybody know how to turn this one off?
We're coming up.
I'm going to get too close to get the feedback. So I rededicated my life from engineering to doing this, and I tell people in my office about 98% of... It's working now?
Yeah, you're good.
Technical issues here. 98% of what I do, I did not learn in school. Does anybody relate to that? Farming? You get out there like, that's not how it works. And so I'm always looking for something that may help my patients. Okay, now there's something else going on. So the real question is, what creates health? We all think if we just eat good food and we breathe good air, that's going to be it. But what percentage of this room thinks that emotional is a big piece of health? Who was stressed out over COVID? Anybody? Come on, raise your hands. You know, shouldn't I get a vaccination? What's the news saying? Should I wear a mask? Am I going to be protected? Is ivermectin going to work? And you're stressed out. Can I go to my family reunion? Can I go to that wedding? It was a lot of stress going on. It's still going on. You know, very divisive way of thinking about it. But one of the biggest questions we face today is how do you create health? You know, as a chiropractor, you go to school and you're supposed to adjust all these bones and everything's going to be perfect in the world, right? That doesn't work anymore. If you're a biochemist, you think if you take a few supplements, that's going to work, right? Going to increase the pathways, the mitochondrial function. But how do you address the emotional piece of people when you're stressed out? Does anybody in the room believe that stress makes you tired after a while? If you're on the grind, trying to get the seed in the ground, where's my fertilizer coming from? Can I pay the bills? What's the price of the crop this year? That's stress. Where do you store stress? Anybody know? Emotions? Any idea? Everywhere, every cell in the body. We're going to talk about it today. So, the three areas that seem to be the most challenging as we age are our physical structure. We're all like this when we're young, and then all of a sudden we're doing that at 90, right? The biochemistry fails eventually in our body. Some of it's aging, some of it's toxicity, some of it can be emotional. But the emotional well-being, no one talks about it. We write 217 million prescriptions a year in this country for antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications. Doesn't that seem strange? We weren't born depressed. We weren't born with anxiety. We weren't born with anger or frustration or fear. Where did it come from? All of our experiences that we attach emotion to. So we're going to talk about that today and kind of get into it a little bit. So how the body measures stress. The human body doesn't measure stress with the stress meter. You can't walk up and go, oh, I've got 10 out of 100 today. The stress comes from everything that you experience in life. Okay, we're talking to farmers today. So a farmer, stress points. Get the crop in, get it off. What's the price going to be? But the body doesn't know the difference between the physical fall. I fell down on the ice this morning and I cracked my head. Or poor planting conditions, poor harvest, death of a loved one. It all measures as stress. Does that make sense? And it's not saying, well, that rate's 10, that rate's 12. Some of the higher stressors are loss of your spouse, divorce, loss of your job. All these things are higher stresses, but they all go into the body. And everything that we experience, we store. So the physical body, let's just do a little bit of background here. 50 trillion cells in the body. And each year we're alive, and it's roughly about the age of 25 to 30, they documented this, we lose 1% of our energy each year in our cell, up to 1.5%. So Vaughn's laughing back there. Vaughn's actually a patient, if I can say that. Wait, Vaughn. So is anybody going to disagree with you that 70 is tougher than 20 or 50 is tougher than 20? What's the difference? So every year they measured this. They actually measured it, loss of energy at the cell level. They did a biopsy, muscle biopsy on a 5-year-old. They found that there was no mitochondrial dysfunction. The part of your cell that makes energy, there was no dysfunction at 5. And at 90, there was 95% loss of mitochondrial function. Where the cell makes energy, makes the ATP, makes you go. Now there's a big difference between physiological age and chronological. You could be 50, but be Brady in the NFL there, he looks like he's about 25, right? He's 42, 43. Or be 50 and have the cell of a 65-year-old. I always say, you want to speed it up? 2 12-packs of beer a night, a couple packs of cigarettes, McDonald's, you know. There's ways to slow that down, but the emotional piece no one seems to talk about. So, biochemistry. We have millions and millions of reactions in our cells every day. And of course, what slows them down? Chemical toxins, pathogens. As we all know, glyphosate, farm chemicals, that can also do it. We've created 80,000 chemicals in the United States since World War II. 80,000 chemicals. Plastics, all this stuff can go into the cell, and what does it do to the cell? It suppresses the enzyme function. So I need more cofactors, more enzymes. The enzyme slows down. I need more vitamin. I need more mineral, more supplementation. Often what happens. And there is an absolute tipping point in our cells for healing that once it's broken or accelerates it. So the aging process is very difficult to reverse sometimes if you can't see the chemistry side of it. But so regeneration versus degeneration. When we're aging, there is a point where we're going along through life and we feel good, we feel good, we feel good, and then we start waking up and we're sore. Anybody relate to that? And we're tired. And I was just framing a duplex on my property, helping the guy out, and I'm going to be 54 in a few weeks. And I was like, wow, that was a lot tougher than it was 20 years ago when I framed my house. And you don't even realize it's happening, but when the cell can't make enough energy, the first thing that happens is we're not regenerating fast enough. And we have this great thing in the United States, we call it itis. Have you heard of itis before? All the itises out there, there they are. Some of them, dermatitis, cellulitis, arthritis, tendonitis, colitis, encephalitis. Anytime the cell can't keep up anymore, inflammation sets in and we label it as an itis. I mean, you can even think of cancer as an itis sometimes. The cell's just not keeping up anymore. So we throw a label on it and then we go and grab something that's going to change our ibuprofen or, you know, prednisone, something to control the itis. But underneath all that, really it's about energy. Is the cell making enough energy? Does that make sense to anybody in here?
Yeah.
And that's what starts to happen. We start to lose energy in the cells. So I taught for CellCore for 3 years, a lot of mitochondrial stuff, a lot of glyphosate stuff, collagen stuff, and I didn't want to bore you with that today. You can go look at an old lecture, I can hand you a textbook on it. But yeah, glyphosate is a huge issue out there for aging, huge issue for collagen dysfunction, gut dysfunction, microbiome destruction. But I want to talk a little bit differently today and look at it a little bit differently. So I was asking myself about 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago in my practice, as I was treating the same thing over and over again in people. Drive the Lyme down, drive the bacteria down, drive the parasite down, bring the mitochondrial function up. Okay, you're good. And here's your 6 supplements, okay? Make sure you take them. And the minute they stop taking, what happens to the energy? If the energy go up or go back down? What do you think, Vaughn? Down. I was missing something. I'm like, what am I missing here? And I'm 18 years, I've done about 100,000 treatments now in my clinic. And that was the question I asked myself, what am I missing here? You know, it's the same chemical imbalance all the time. I can fight it, I can drive it out, better for a while, then worse again. So I looked up one day and I had a little chart on the wall, and it was right in front of me. I'd made this chart years ago. You know, when you do kinesiology, you're supposed to look at the emotional side of everything and the structural side of everything and the biochemistry side. And what we tend to forget sometimes is that our emotions control our biochemistry. Does anybody believe that in here? Our emotions control our biochemistry, hugely control our biochemistry. So emotional toxicity, whatever you're holding in your physical, energetic being, will eventually affect how your cells work. We've all been sad, we've all been stressed, we've all lost a loved one. All this has happened to us, and that really changes the chemistry of the body. So here's the question I have for you. Do emotions run biochemistry? I think they do. So any emotional toxicity that you're holding can change the chemistry of the body, and eventually it feeds into physiology. And that's what we measure it quite often, measure the physiology. You know, are the cells working? Are you replicating properly? Is there cancer starting somewhere? Do I have inflammation in my cells? So when you go into a chiropractor, it's mostly structural, isn't it? Anybody been to a chiropractor in here? You know, you're in, you're out, 3-5 minutes, crack the bones. To a medical doctor, what do they do? Run a bunch of lab tests, right? Blood, urine, it's not there, can't find it. So you're crazy, it's not really your problem. Go a little bit deeper maybe, you go into the, oh, let's do an MRI, a CAT scan, a dog scan, a PET scan, we're gonna scan you and figure this out. Because sometimes these problems don't live actually in the blood or in the urine. Especially like for Lyme, I've probably checked 50,000 people for Lyme over the years now. Over and over and over, I checked 5,000, I've been doing it for 13 years, you do the math on that. And Lyme doesn't hide the bloodstream, it uses the bloodstream to travel. Glyphosate uses the bloodstream to travel, where do you find it? Deep in the collagen, in the joints, in the brain, myelin sheath. So it has a great way of hiding here. So, emotions. So we've all experienced these different things in our life. You're sick to your stomach, you can't stomach something. You ever been sick to your stomach sometime? Dreading something? Come on, raise your hands, come on. Anybody awake out there? All right. Heartache. Has anybody ever felt heartache after losing a close friend or a loved one? Yeah, I have. Headache, stressful situation, low back pain, maybe you don't feel supported. financially, emotionally, who knows what it is. But the Chinese medicine, for thousands of years, they've always had an association with emotion with each organ. And they give the main organs of the body 2 hours a day. And here it is. You can look at it. Stomach. Over-responsive, hopeless, spleen, low self-esteem, large intestine, perfectionism, lung, grief. So these are actual emotions that we believe are stored. And I always ask my patients, where do we store emotions? Okay? So the connection with the emotions and the biochemistry. I realized that when I was looking at these patients, I was good at chemistry. I do muscle testing, biomuscle testing, and walk through a pathway, see where it's blocked. And my teacher that taught me was from England, and he's been doing this for almost 50 years. He would get in a pathway, and he would say, whenever you're stuck in a pathway, it's either deficiency or toxicity, stop you from getting that next chemical change. For example, how many steps does it take to make glucose into energy in the body? Roughly. Anybody have an idea? About 20, 21 steps. 21 chemical changes, 21 enzymes, coenzymes, cofactors, all the way down. And any one of those steps can be blocked just like that by a toxin, right? How long do you live if you breathe in cyanide? Anybody? Yes?
10
Minutes?
seconds.
About 15 seconds, I think I read on the internet. You're dead in 15 seconds. Cyanide grabs onto complex 3 in the mitochondrial transport chain, and the heart stops at 15 seconds. Silo gas, river pit gas, how long do you live? Not very long. 1 breath? Out. Anybody had surgery in here? Anesthesia? How long do you count down from 100? 99, 98. You give you too much, you're dead. Right? Stops your mitochondrial function. So that's the chemical side of that. But the emotional side is a little bit different. So I realized that I had to begin to create a simple system to measure, locate, find these potential emotional blocks. And the bigger task is to figure out how to release them. So I started researching on the internet, looking on stuff. So emotions plus experiences create what in the body, do you think? So I made a definition up here. So from the time we are conceived, everything we experience is stored somewhere in the body. You guys believe that?
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, doesn't it? When sperm meets egg, it all starts. And potentially, any emotion your parents are carrying, because it wasn't your cell, was it? So if you believe that emotions are stored on the cells, you can have the generational stuff come through, their energy is tied into you. Why do you act like your dad so much? I don't know. Or your mom, or what's that about? So each experience in our lives has a charged emotion attached to it. Some very pleasant, some very unpleasant. Asking someone to recall memories sometimes is very interesting. You can bring tears to their eyes, they can laugh. You can even categorize some of these things as heavier emotion or a trauma. So, trauma can take on a whole crazy level of experiences. So maybe we can define trauma real quick. What's trauma to somebody? So trauma can be defined as an experience we've had in our lifetime where we attach to negative emotion. It's an experience. When a person is asked to recall experience, some people may have a huge response. Anybody been in the military? I've seen a few in my office where they think about being in combat and they go right into a shake. Their whole body starts to shake. They're there. I think if anybody was in Vietnam, so you would relate very close to what I'm talking about here. Okay? And it doesn't have to be that much of a trauma, but that's post-traumatic. Car accident. Reliving that car accident, all those emotions come right back up in. They're in your body. Okay? So when a person is asked to recall the experience, it can be PTSD type of symptoms there. The memory of the experience of the event seems to be stored in the brain, but the emotion, according to Chinese medicine and other medicines out there, stored in the tissue, every cell of the body that has a charge on it, and store that emotion. So, looking for evidence. So, has anybody ever heard of Gernheimer, Reich, Hammerad of Germany? Anybody heard of him? So he was a guy that ran, it's right there, oncology department. I'll forward the next slide. So he ran oncology department in Germany, and his son was shot, and all of a sudden, a few months later, he developed testicular cancer. Big stressful event. And he thought, never been sick a day in my life. Where did this come from? He started interviewing patients, and he figured out that he felt like the emotion maybe started the cancer in his body. Makes sense? And I'll show you a few slides later. So he started actually investigating this. He was the head of the oncology department. Why not? I have the scans here. I have all the patients here. So he started interviewing patients, and sure enough, every one of them that he was talking to said, yeah, I had a trauma here, I had a trauma there 8 to 10, 12 years before the cancer showed up. So cancer, you can actually say that cancer is probably highly emotional. We all want to relate it to strictly genetics or strictly toxin, but probably the biggest driver of it's emotional. I'll show you in a second what I'm talking about. He found on MRIs that when there was a big trauma that happened, they would form these concentric rings in the brain. And then he devised a system that would actually help the person release the trauma. The rings would disappear, and the cancer disappeared. He was drawing a direct correlation to the cancer with the brain, how it related to the body. Of course, if you do this stuff in our world, what happens sometimes? You get fired. So you got chased out of Germany, basically, right? Into France, France into Spain, and now he's dead. I think he made 82 years old. But he was harangued. Is Bayer chemical out of Germany?
Yes.
So I'm guessing they didn't want him to be, would have cut their profits a little bit. If let's just do this emotional technique and your cancer starts to shrink. So what was driving that out of it? But he was called a charlatan, a quack. I've been called that a few times in my life. That's okay. Because people that don't understand what you're trying to do or say or show them, when it's very, very different, quite often they have a pretty big reaction to it, and it can't be true. But I think if we actually stacked what we know about the human body, what's really there to the ceiling, I think we'd probably be about one playing card thick what we actually know. That's how little I think we actually know about the real workings of the body. We can manipulate the body like crazy with chemistry, but to really understand how it works, a whole different thing. So the moment the emotional conflict occurs, he was saying the biology corresponding to the organ and tissue responding to the cell starts to degenerate. Necrosis, the ovaries and testicles, bone osteoporosis, bone cancer. So he was relating highly the emotion to the cell level, what was happening at the cell level. So the big question was, are emotions affecting our health? Yes. So how do we process an event, an emotion attached directly affects the function of the cells where the emotion is stored. And so I've been doing this technique now for about 6 months, but emotion is cellular energy. Normal cellular function occurs when the body uses fat, carbon, protein, we put in our mouth, what we eat. The mitochondria in the body will pick this up. They turn into the same chemical. All foods become the same chemical in the body. And as an idea, I'm not trying to get too deep into chemistry here, but we have mitochondria in our cells. That's what makes ATP, that's what we run on. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you're going to make 150 pounds of ATP in your body just to stay alive today. You know, watch Netflix all day? No, you're not going to get off the couch? It's bad weather outside? Okay, 150. Going to get up and go walk 4 miles, go do a workout, go out to eat with your wife, go to a ball game, 200 pounds of ATP. The minute you can't make enough ATP at a cell level, the itis sets in, inflammation sets in, the degeneration starts. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah.
Not too deep in chemistry. So that idea, the skeletal muscle has about 800 per cell. The heart muscle says, I got 24/7 here, baby, I can't quit. I need 2,000 per cell. The brain, about 5,000 per cell. So on the bottom you can see this, the brain uses 25% of the calories we consume, 25% of the oxygen we breathe. It prefers glucose, by the way. You can go into ketosis, yes you can do that, but it prefers glucose. So that little 6-pound mass wants 1/4 of all the food you eat, calories, and 1/4 the oxygen you breathe. So what do you think dies first for lack of nutrition or oxygen? Second? Third, liver, kidney, typically. Okay? So what do we die of? Brain failure, heart failure, kidney failure, liver failure. I've never had a patient die of a sore knee yet. It hasn't happened. It might happen, it hasn't happened yet. So here's what I taught at Cellcore for 3 years, thousands of doctors. Food, fuel, make energy, fats, carbs, and proteins, goes through what they call the Krebs cycle. This is kind of the big thing in chemistry, the Krebs cycle. Anybody know the Krebs cycle in here? Okay? Yeah, you forget it, you get past the test, you get past it, and never look at that again, right? Too much chemistry.
Exactly.
But all we're doing is taking food and breaking it apart. That's all we're doing. This whole thing is about taking food, breaking it apart, and then in the bottom down you get oxygen, and you make energy again. That's all we're doing. So Krebs cycle should run clockwise. So here's a little picture of the Krebs cycle. It should run clockwise. It runs clockwise. You pull hydrogens off of it, and you make ATP with oxygen. What's interesting is they've now discovered the reverse Krebs cycle. Anybody heard of the reverse Krebs cycle?
Yep.
So the reverse Krebs cycle is when we actually run it backwards. That's a cancer cell. Anybody know that? So when it runs backwards, you're using carbon dioxide, but you're breathing out, instead of using oxygen, that you should be breathing in. So the cell does not make energy, it uses energy up. You ever heard of cancer eats you? Anybody heard that before? It just eats a person up? That's what it does. So in a strong negative emotion, and here's the interesting part. So the doctor in Germany, Hammer, he was figuring out that, wow, when these people have these really strong emotions, cancer forms up. So Nick Lane from England, the PhD guy over there, he was saying that about 1967 they figured out that the Krebs cycle could run backwards, but they couldn't prove it. They didn't have the scientific ability in the lab. In the last 4 or 5 years, now they can show that the Krebs cycle runs backwards. Every cancer cell seems to run backwards. And when it runs backwards, they see the metabolites being created there that actually create the cancer in the body, grows cancer. So you're not using oxygen, you're using carbon dioxide. You're not making energy, you're using energy out of the cell. So there's a huge correlation there. Hammer was seeing it over in Germany. We're seeing it here. So what I was looking at is, what is that about? But you can say all disease would be causing this. So here's the reverse Krebs cycle. Not to get deep into chemistry, but there it is. Runs backwards instead of the net reaction. Using carbon dioxide, you're using 12 hydrogens, 5 ATP, and you're making the cell material to grow cells. So Hammer had done this way back in the 70s. He was saying, looks like we're actually creating cancer from the reverse Krebs cycle. He didn't associate with that, but he knew once the emotion was collapsed off of the cell, with his treatment he was doing, all of a sudden the cancer would shrink and go away. And decades later, 92% of the people he treated were still cancer-free. It's pretty incredible. But again, he lost his license, they chased him out of the country, and now he's passed. So in a nutshell, strong negative emotions held at a cellular level cause the energy system of the cell to run backwards, eating all the energy up to the cell, creating the perfect situation for various forms of cancer to start. But collapsing or releasing the emotion at a cell level allows the cell to run the right direction again. Sound too simple? Too simple? Too simple, right? Yeah, too simple. So this new emotional reset technique that I've been working on was created to help you release the emotions off the physical body. And does anybody know that we have like a field around us? Everybody ever notice that? You don't have a conversation that close to someone's face. It's probably about that far from their face. And you can feel people like, so I deal with patients every day, right? And I'll be like, oh, Shelly, you put Mary in the schedule? Oh, God. Has anybody ever been around somebody where you're like, oh, Bill's in town? You deal with Bill this week. I'm not dealing with him. You know, you guys are laughing, you know what I'm talking about, right? There are certain people that you would call energy vampires, or you'd be like, oh, I don't, I'm out of the office that day. I'm out of the country that day. My cell phone's broken. My email's broken. And those people are carrying a lot of trauma on their body. We all carry trauma, no doubt. Because everything that you store from the time you're born, you're going to hold it somewhere in your body, that memory, and you're going to attach either a positive emotion to it or a negative emotion. Does anybody want to test me on this? Anybody want to come up front on the stage? With the hat on, what's your name? You want to come up for a second? This could be ugly. I was going to pick on Carol, but I'm going to pick on this guy. What's your name? Nick. Nick. Nice to meet you. So, Nick and I don't know each other? No. Never met before? No. So, I do muscle testing in my clinic. And this is the way I get into the body. You can do a blood test, MRI, CAT scan, dog scan, whatever you want to do. But this is how I do it. So, Nick, clear your mind, and so I'm going to see if the shoulder's strong. Push up for me here. Push up. I could probably stand on that. Think about something that you love or care about. I don't care what it is. Let me enjoy doing, love or care about. Push up. You stay strong. Think about something that breaks your heart, makes you sad. Every time you think about it, it just frustrates you, makes you sad, breaks your heart. Push up. Best of 5? Breaks your heart, me. What just happened to him? Yeah. That in a nutshell could be called reverse Krebs cycle. Thanks. Just a little demo. So what I wanted to show you is I don't really know what that was. He's attached an emotion to something in his life. He's sort of somewhere in his body. He had to recall it. And the minute he thought about what happened to his energy. Hey, think about something you love. Hey, Krebs cycle runs properly, the right direction. He's strong. This is the biochemistry, how fast. That was a nanosecond. I mean, he put it up to his brain, and I pushed, and he's like, yeah, I can't hold that. It's not a trick. That's how fast. So what happens if you hold on to a thought? If you're pissed off at somebody for days, or weeks, or months, that son of a gun, he did me wrong. Or it's a big loss. Maybe you lost a loved one, and you just couldn't get over it for a while. That ever happened to anybody? Nobody? You guys are incredible out there. But you wear it. That's the heartbreak, or the heart, not heartburn, heartache. You know, I lost a close friend about 10 years ago, and for about 3 months, I lost my will to live. Doesn't that sound crazy? All the drive went out of me. I lost my parents before that, not even close to that feeling. So emotions are that strong. They change the cellular function so quickly. Reverse the Krebs cycle. Energy drops, and you could feel it right away, couldn't you? Yeah, and so this is what happens at the cell level. So we don't want to hold that there, but that's the reverse Krebs cycle. So after months of testing on various things, I was able to figure out how we could actually reverse this. So we developed a technique to do this because I've done about 100,000 patient visits in my office. Good at biochemistry, can find glyphosate, I can find Lyme, heavy metals, and I can treat that piece. But when I was doing the triad of health, the emotional toxicity, that was the strongest piece I've ever found for helping someone turn the cells back on. Now, if you don't believe me, you think about stress in general, just stress in your body, you're stressed out, it exhausts you after a while. You can't figure something out, you're worried about something. That steals energy from your physical body. You gotta hold that thought, hold that energy, hold that anger. And I always say, what's your emotional energy? What do you run on? Some people run their whole life in fear, right? They're fearful of everything. Fearful of COVID, they're fearful of pneumonia, influenza, RSV, fearful of the tax man, they're fearful of everything. They just run around fearful. Other people are just pissed all the time. They're running around and they're angry all the time. I'm going to show you. I mean, I lived my life a lot of years of frustration. Me and my dad, we did a little bit of this. Anybody's dad, you do this before? Huh? Yeah? Yeah. He sees it this way, you see it that way. I want to do it this way, I want to do it that way. So, and I was able to let that go after starting to do some of this work here. I work with a lot of people that, energetic intuitives, what you call that, where they can feel energy. I was working with one about a year ago. And sounds woo-woo again, so Bob, I apologize for the woo-woo-ness of this talk. She was treating me one day, and she said, did you have problems in your childhood? And I said, yeah, there was some stress there. She said, I can see in my mind's eye this boy about 11 or 12 who's pissed off and he's hurt. He won't look at me. He's got his head down. And I said, well, what do you think it is? She said, she doesn't know why anybody would hurt his family and why he has to do a man's work at 11. See, when I was 10, my dad got burned up in a tractor accident. It took 1650 Oliver gas in the middle of a hot day. It's hard to vapor lock. He reached up for the gas cap. What did he do? He turned it. And shot the geyser all over his body. I saw him walk in the house with over half his skin off his body. Would that be trauma for somebody?
Oh, boy.
I didn't know how to handle that. He told me he was going to die, 1979, severe second-degree burns. He comes home, he can't work for about a year and a half. I had to learn how to watch him walk again on a walker. And as he walked down the hall, the blood was streaming out of his legs because they didn't have skin grafts in 79. So what did they do? The skin grew back and it cracked, and he walked some more, it cracked. So I watched a guy with a bucket of water come behind him with a trail of blood. Think that would cause trauma?
Yeah.
Okay. 2 years later, we lost our barn in the middle of all this. Adding on to our barn, the barn burned down. Contractor got sued for it. We lost all of our crops that year. As an 11-year-old boy, I'm like, whew. 2 years later, my grandparents were murdered. My uncle was murdered. I'll just say a crazy guy. You think that causes trauma?
Yeah. Wow.
Now these might be more than normal traumas, but physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, a poor relationship. And so I was forced in some roles I didn't know how to adjust that at 11 or 12. So my measurement of myself became what in my life? How much work I got done every day, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I measured myself every day, because my parents did after 11, what I get done for work every day. And then, of course, if you tragically lose parents, grandparents that were murdered, you're sitting there thinking, who would do that to you? And so you go to school every day and you cry. You go to school every day and you cry. And eventually you stop crying, right? That's every trauma. And you forget about it. But 42 years later, guess what she finds in me? Hey, what's that about? You don't want anybody to hurt your family and why you have to be a man at 11. I didn't know I was carrying that anymore. I had no idea. And so that's what inspired me to start doing this emotional work, because I realized I was holding on to that, and I knew I was, and I was driven for no good reason. I was too driven. I couldn't find the balance. Anybody not find the balance in your life out there? What the hell's driving you? Well, obviously it's an emotion. Is it good or bad? You know? Is it helping you or hurting you? We got to find that balance in life. I couldn't find balance. So it probably cost me my marriage, because she wanted to go hold hands and go for a walk, and I wanted to go plant some more blueberries, you know? I couldn't figure out why anybody didn't want to work that hard. And so it created an imbalance in my life, my whole life. And as I started doing this work and helping and tanning the back, and I will demonstrate this technique afterward. If anybody has something that's been bothering you, holding inside, we're not charging today, come see us and just experience it. It's kind of fun. And I want to show you guys how big this piece is. Because I wouldn't have believed you. I was an engineer, right? Got to be factual. Show me on paper. What's the bending moment? You know? I didn't understand how the emotions could play in so deeply to someone's health. So we developed a technique, and you just basically do a verbal algorithm to the body, which means you talk to it. Anybody ever been in talk therapy? Just be honest in here. Any psychiatrists in here? Any psychiatrists? Okay, I don't want to offend anybody. Talk therapy for me just stirs stuff up. I never got rid of it. I talked about it, I thought about it, blah, but it didn't resolve the problem inside my body. I was still holding it in my liver, that frustration or that heartache in my heart, or the not feeling supported in my life in my low back. So the point being, if you can actually ask the body to release it, it's a pretty interesting thing what happens, and it happens immediately. So when you do collapse that, I see the cellular energy changing almost immediately in somebody. So my experience, I'm not here to create a bigger practice. I'm here to maybe crack a few nuts here, just maybe make you think about stuff. Because what you're going to see is that emotional toxicity can be so powerful. I don't care how many vitamins you take. I don't care how many minerals you take. I don't care what food you eat. The emotional toxicity is stronger than any of that. So what I've really figured out over the last 6 months or a year of doing this is that a lot of times we're supporting trauma in the body, emotional trauma. So you're supplementing trauma in your body. I'm taking my vitamins and minerals, I'm doing okay. I stop taking it and my energy goes down, my physical body goes back down. What if you could collapse that emotional trauma in the body? Let it go. Think about something that doesn't bother me anymore. Stay strong to it. And I've got some biosystems that we use for that. And then all the energy goes into the physical body now, instead of trying to hold that trauma, that emotional stress you're holding. Because remember, you don't remember this anymore. I did not think 42 years later, I was still holding the trauma of losing my grandparents or watching my dad come in all burned up in a farm accident. It was just something that happened to me. I put it in the back of my head and somewhere in my body, and it was done, right? It wasn't. This is probably the driver for a lot of cancers out there, and a lot of other things that go on that we don't understand. So I call it EPI technique. It's a big word, but emotional permutation, interfield, quantum collapsing. Anybody ever understand quantum fields? It's craziness, right? So just think of it like this. We have energy around us. We can store emotions in our physical body or our energetic field. And this is probably why some people you don't like being around. You just don't like their energy. Anybody relate to that at all? You deal with Mary today. I'm not. My cell phone's broken. So it's a big word, but we want to make it called EPIC, so I figured all these neat words. But what it does, it helps you release the trauma, emotional trauma in your physical body, so that cell starts to normalize and function again. It's quick, it's so simple, it's ridiculous. If anybody wants to experience it, we'll treat for a few hours today. We're not charging for it. We want to just show people what kind of change it can make in the body. It's pretty cool. So what I've seen, I've been doing this for about 4 months now, working on the technique for probably, thinking about it, trying to create it for probably 8 months. So chronic pain. Anybody ever had a chronic shoulder problem, chronic neck problem, chronic low back problem? I don't care how many adjustments you get, it just comes back and comes back and comes back. I've seen that change. We just had a gal have her stimulator taken out. How long did she had the stimulator in her back, Tammy, you know?
Over 8 years.
So she had so much pain. She was molested. So this gal was molested multiple times by her uncle when she was small. So what I find with people that have been molested or physically hurt, they develop chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia all the time. They don't want to be touched anymore. So it's almost, or they put weight on. It's like armoring up against it. And so we did the technique several times on her now, and she had to take it out 2 weeks ago. And Tammy is a healer back there. Helped her with some of the emotional stuff that was still in the background, and she's pain-free. After years of pain, drugs, pain, stimulator, more pain. Chronic Lyme disease. I do a lot of Lyme disease up there. When I do this technique on people, we treat the Lyme. I can't find anything. It's like to collapse the emotional part of it, and there's nothing for it to live in. So one of the biggest reasons I did this technique, I started asking the body, what would it be like if the cell was actually healthy? If you weren't holding emotion on the cell, could disease live there? Could a parasite live there? I worked for Cellcore for 3 years. And it's like, Jesus, we treated that parasite for 9 months. What the? Didn't make any sense to me. You drive it out, can't find any more. It's back in 3 months. So is it the microbes missing? Is it the emotion there? You know, so I jokingly, when I treat you today, I'll ask you, can you digest life? Can you eliminate the crap from your life? Can you stomach life? Are there any frustrations in your life? Because these are the things that hold on those organs. And you know, I have a vial, and we'll show that to you, and then we can treat it later. I've never wanted to treat cancer in my life, because I didn't know how to address it. It was too scary for me. I'll give you another example. After my father passed in '99, my mother was so angry at him. God darn him! He did all these cows and all this stuff. Oh, I said, Mom, we're going to figure it out. We'll figure it out. No, I said, and she was very resentful and very angry that my dad died. Anybody relate to that? Left me with a big freaking mess, right? So she died of gallbladder liver cancer 10 years later. The interesting part was there's never been cancer in her family anywhere. They died at 92 of heart failure. And I thought about that in my mind. I thought, oh, that was interesting. She had resentment, the frustration of my dad passing, and for years, 5 or 6 years for sure, she couldn't let it go. And that's probably normal manifestation time. Diagnosis of death, 16 days. 16 days. Okay? Hard lessons, right? Autoimmune. I've seen people's RA symptoms go down. I've got a kid with LEMS. Anybody know what LEMS is? It's a really weird disease where you attack your receptors for your muscles so you can't move. You're like you're so weak you can't get out of a chair. We've been treating him, I think 4 or 5 times now. We space it out. He's down to using medication 1 time a day instead of 4 times a day. And they've told him in the medical field, you can't decrease your medication. You're never going to change this. He does $600,000 of medication a year. He has to go do the IV, IgGs in his arm every 6 weeks. And he called me up. I think it's changing. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I can take medication all the time now. I said, good for you. And then just lately, Ted and I have been working with people with some cancer. Now, I'm not treating cancer. The video camera, get this right, I'm not treating cancer. We're just taking and helping the emotions associated with that. And the one person, we worked on her, how many times, Tammy? 3 times total, you guys? And she's with our Church of the Brothers, brothers up in our area up there. And she couldn't do the chemotherapy anymore. It was just making her so sick she couldn't get out of bed, so she stopped taking it. And we started working with her, and she went in, did a CAT scan, tumors are shrinking, numbers are down. 4 weeks later, come back in, tumor shrinking. They were half the size in 6 weeks. Yes, I did give her some supplements. Did treat Lyme on her. That was more for just energy for the cell. There's a lot of emotions that were being held in the colon and the liver area on her. She still decided to go in and do the surgery because she was so fearful, right? But I don't know if anybody in the room, if 6 weeks your cancer shrunk in half, would you say, give me a month? I'm going to wait a month here. And so she had the surgery 2 weeks ago. And she's had a very adverse reaction to the surgery, and she got helicoptered back down to Rochester the other day. Kind of sad. So what I'm trying to tell you here through this little talk and what I'm experiencing is that the emotional piece of your health is probably way, way bigger than you're ever going to believe because no one's ever talked about it, right? There's a pill for that. It's called Wellbutrin or Prozac, or, you know what I'm saying? And that doesn't, again, we're not born depressed, overweight, tired, angry. That happens in time as we hold the emotions in our body. So the whole goal is to help you release that stuff so that the toxic chemistry, the toxic emotion can actually shift your biochemistry so you can have more normal biochemistry so your supplements work better and you can have better health overall. I've been doing this technique to myself for about 3 months now on a weekly basis. And I do it with my kids. I'm divorced, and my kids come back and forth every week. And when my kids come back, they want me to do it on them. Yeah, you do the lights on us? Yeah, I'll do the lights on you. The little boy's 5. He can't find his socks most days, right? So one night I treated him. The next morning he calls me at about 5:30, and he's always wanting to help with the technique. He's a real sensitive kid. You look at him with your eyebrow up and he starts to cry, right? Sensitive kid. My daughter, not like that. He crawls in bed one morning at 5:30. He says to me, it's dark in the room, Dad, you know I love you. I said, I love you too, buddy. He says, you know, Dad, I'm healing. And then he says to me, and you're healing too, Dad. And he pauses. He said, Dad, can I tell you something? I said, sure. He says, you know, we're healing each other. That was so profound for my 5-year-old. I'm laying there and I'm thinking, that didn't come from him. He can't, I won't tell you what he can't find most days. He can't find the toilet most days in his socks, but like, you just point it right there in the middle, not to the side. So it was too profound to come from him. You know what I'm saying? His sentences aren't that way. So I took that as maybe a message from God saying that this is good work, it's the right work. I think it's going to help a lot of people. I almost broke down there. I couldn't talk about it from the first day because it was just like, what? So that's what we've been seeing in patients. It's not a drug. It's not a placebo that I can see. It seems to be working at a level that I never thought could happen. But it seems to reverse the Krebs cycle. It seems to make the body more efficient. It seems to make everything work better in the body. And it is a very simple technique. I'm hoping someday that we can actually have an app on your phone. And you could just do the app and probably have a little device on the side here, and you can program it to actually treat your families. Okay? I don't want to have it so you have to come to me. I mean, everybody's got a cell phone right now. Yeah. Practically everybody's got a cell phone, and these smart cell phones. Yeah. So it would make it easy to treat lots and lots of people with this technique. That's my ultimate goal. Right now we're just treating one at a time. So the future of medicine, in my opinion, will not be a stronger drug to overrun the biochemistry of the body, blocking receptor or driving receptor. The future of medicine will be unlocking the toxic emotional component stored in our physical and energetic fields, allowing for the most efficient transfer and creation of energy with a minimal amount of food or supplementation. To me, that's probably the future. That's my opinion of the future of medicine. Okay? And then what would it look like if we could live our lives with the knowledge of a lifetime before we start, discernment of a wise man, and love everybody like a little child. I think we get bitter in life, and we get frustrated with life, and it's hard to let go of some of that stuff. So thank you for letting me come down and be crazy and woo-woo. We'll be in the back. Anybody wants to be treated, we'll treat for a few hours. It looks crazy, but for some people the effect is pretty profound. I'm not here looking for patients. I've got plenty of them. I have more patience and a different version of patience now that I'm doing this. I'm better with my kids. I'm better with a lot of things in my life, and I want all of you to try to experience that, because when we hang on to these emotions, it just drives the chemistry crazy in the body, and eventually we pay for it with some form of disease process. So, Bob, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for listening. If I confused you, I'm sorry. If you got anything out of it, great. So, thanks for letting me talk.
Thank you.
And it was a psychiatrist or a psychologist that evaluated the Korean War deaths from North Korea. And they didn't use physical efforts to kill the people they captured. It was emotional. And they knew that if they could empty that individual's emotional bucket, they would go in a corner and die within 3 or 4 days.
Oh, is this, I believe that, just working here? Hello? Okay, it's very true. I just listened to a 2-hour interview with this Auschwitz survivor. She was 16 in Auschwitz, and it was pretty incredible. She was there with her 3 sisters, her mom and her dad, and I think it was Dr. Mendel himself at Auschwitz pointed to her mom and asked her directly, "Is this your mother or is this your sister?" And she said, "That's my mother." "Oh, you, gas chamber. Killed her. Gone." She blamed herself for her whole lifetime for that. She said there was 3 people, types of people in that camp, maybe 4. There was the one that was angry to be there and attacked the guards and was shot immediately. There were ones that went crazy, ran into the electric fence or electrocuted. Obviously the ones that were gassed in the chamber. She's 95 now. Her 99-year-old sister just passed. And she talked about the trauma of that and being broken inside there. And she had to hold the belief that this was just a moment in time for her in that camp, because when they lost hope, they were dead in less than a week. I mean, you think about that for a second, being there, watching your family raped, murdered, beat, starved. And you can live through that, come out of that camp at 65 pounds and regain your weight back. You're 6'2" and you're 70 pounds. Their body was being eaten off of them, but the hope, and that's how strong emotions are, the hope and the belief that this would end sometime in life. But when they lost that hope, they were dead in less than a week. So it's very true. Yeah, there's another book out there called The Body Keeps the Score. And that guy dealt with, I think, post-traumatic in Vietnam vets and stuff too, was written. So it's a bigger piece than we ever want to believe. But when we hold these emotions, and we don't know how to process them, we go in and it's a medication, isn't it? And that might hold you from committing suicide or falling down farther, but it doesn't let you live your best life. I think we all want to live our best life. I mean, I want to live my best life, the most passionate, the most purposeful life. I did not want to feel like after I lost my best friend for 3 months, that feeling of, boy, if I died today, I could see him again. It was the most weird feeling I've ever had in my life so I've experienced a lot of ups and downs in my life, so I know what you're talking about there. Anybody else have a question? Yeah?
Do we know if plants have use the Krebs cycle?
I think all plants use the Krebs cycle, but plants use carbon dioxide instead of oxygen, so yeah.
Bacteria can also run the Krebs cycle backwards.
Yeah. It's not meant to run backwards in a human being, but yeah, so when carbon dioxide is used in a plant, that's how it works there. Yeah. Yeah. So they're using carbon dioxide to create the glucose, right, in your crop, and we eat that, and we run it clockwise and use oxygen, and we go back to carbon dioxide, and it's pretty amazing, right? It just happened to happen out of nowhere, right? Yeah. Yeah, any other questions? So anybody who wants to see this technique, or if you have something that you think that we may be able to help you with, Tammy and I will hold space and treat back there for a while. Just anybody who wants to. So yeah, this is a new technique. We're just developing it right now. It's been probably the 3rd month of doing it full time in my practice. And the changes are so profound that my nutritional sales have gone down a little bit, but my what's happening in there is going up. And so I would rather supplement regeneration in your body than supplement trauma. And that's the biggest thing I've seen change there is when the emotions are released from the body, that energy that's being burned up on that stress in your body now is going into that cell and regenerating how it's supposed to work. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So I got a question. So
Yeah.
You talked about oxygen creating the Krebs cycle to go clockwise and carbon dioxide kind of initiating it or whatever to go counter. So does like a carbonated drink, carbonated water, Puree or anything like, does that affect the Krebs cycle?
I don't think so. Yeah. Obviously, we're meant to, it's actually, oxygen is not actually using the Krebs cycle, it's using electron transport chain to sweep the electrons away so the hydrogens can be run through, that's a lot of
That's what I
chemistry.
tried to say.
Yeah, so it's a lot of complicated chemistry there, but the basics of it is that as humans, we want to run clockwise, use oxygen, and basically fats, carbon, sugars all become acetyl-CoA to start the Krebs cycle spinning. I don't think anybody's identified how it runs backwards, but when they take and put the cell underneath the microscope, a cancer cell, they see the metabolites being created, and then they've done the math and the chemistry and said, oh, it's running backwards, and then the cancer cell doesn't need oxygen, which is very interesting, right? So they run and they can, that's why Otto Warburg in the 30s, even though he was Jewish, Hitler didn't kill him, he felt like it was lactic acid, lactic acidosis. So we've all done something too many times and our muscle starts to cramp up and burn. That's lactic acid building up. He thought it was that stopping the Krebs cycle and causing cancer. Yes, that could be a big part of it. That's why we talk about alkaline diets and having mineralization there. That's very important too, because without the vitamins and minerals there, the coenzymes and cofactors, it stops also. So any pathogen in your body stealing a vitamin or a mineral, or in this case like iron for parasites, then all of a sudden you're going to have an anemia that no one can find, or a slower cycle there. And of course, we call them probiotics because they give us things that actually help our body, and then we call them pathogens because they seem to make toxins. C. diff or H. pylori and all these other bacteria that could be there, any of these nematodes or trematodes or cestodes, they're not typically harmful to the system. Maybe some are in some way, but yeah, so we want to limit the bad critters and keep the good critters up, and that's your microbiome and all that stuff behind it. Yeah.
Since you mentioned Otto Warburg, his theory on cancer, tumors as they grow, they can't get oxygen, so they use anaerobic glycolysis.
Yep.
Okay, they're still producing energy that way, though that isn't the same thing as this reverse Krebs cycle.
Yeah, it's interesting. Krebs was a student of Otto, I believe. But Krebs never actually spoke about the reverse Krebs cycle that I know of. There's a good, if you ever want to watch this guy's interested over here, obviously. There's a guy from England named Nick Lane, and he goes into real deep discussion about all this stuff. You probably would really love to watch hours of his videos. They're too deep for me mostly, but he's talking about these things in the ocean that are excreting, out of the bottom of the ocean, and then they're running that reverse Krebs cycle and stuff. It's just a cell thing that we know in the human body we should run clockwise. But again, I'm not a deep chemist. This man over here can answer all your questions. Okay. But it's interesting. There's been theories about this, but I think for years and years and years, we couldn't get to the emotional piece. I think this technique is going to help a lot of people get to that emotional piece. And most of us in this room don't think we have something emotional. I certainly didn't think I had anything emotional. That was 42 years ago. Why would that bother me today? But that was my underlying emotional energy I was running on. I was angry for years and years and years. And so I was going to show everybody I could outwork everybody. Not good for a marriage. Not good for friendships. Because people go, what the heck's wrong with you? Why don't you just watch the football game? You don't have to go build a house in the third quarter. Don't do that. I gotta go do something, And so just being still in life sometimes is more important than being physically active all the time. It's that balance that I think we've lost in a lot of ways here. So anybody wants to play with us in the back, come on back. I know we probably have a break at some point, or if you just want to step out of the room, I don't want to interrupt anybody else's talks this morning, but I'm really excited about what I think this is going to do for the healthcare system, because right now it's another drug isn't going to change the end game of what we're experiencing in our body. We all know that. Yeah, that's why we're here. All right, thanks everybody.